I found my own obituary folded inside my husband's jacket pocket at 2:15 in the morning. Not a draft, not a joke, a real obituary. Printed on thick cream paper, with my full name at the top. Claire Morgan, beloved wife, devoted daughter, generous friend. According to that piece of paper, I had died peacefully after a long private struggle. The funeral service was already scheduled for Saturday. The strangest part was, Saturday was still 3 days away. I stood barefoot in our dark laundry room, holding that paper with shaking hands, listening to the dryer thump behind me like a slow heartbeat. My husband, Daniel, was upstairs asleep. At least, I thought he was asleep. The house was quiet. The neighborhood was quiet. Outside, rain slid down the kitchen windows, turning our nice little street in Columbus, Ohio into a blur of streetlights and black pavement. I read the obituary again. My eyes stopped on one line. In lieu of flowers, donations may be made to the Morgan Hope Foundation. I had never heard of the Morgan Hope Foundation. But my last name was Morgan, and my husband's last name was Morgan. That was the moment I knew something was not just wrong in my marriage. Something was dangerous. For 12 years, I believed Daniel was the safest place in my life. He was calm when I panicked. He was polite when I was angry. He remembered the names of my coworkers, opened doors for old ladies, and always knew exactly what to say when people were watching. He worked as a financial planner downtown, wore navy suits, and told everyone his greatest dream was to give me a quiet life. A quiet life. That phrase makes me laugh now, but not because it is funny. It makes me laugh because quiet is where monsters like Daniel hide. 3 months before I found the obituary, my father died. His name was Arthur Bell. He raised me by himself after my mother left when I was 9. He was not rich in the way people imagine from movies, but he was careful. He owned a small chain of hardware stores, 2 rental properties, and a lake house in northern Michigan that had been in our family for years. He drove an old Ford pickup until the doors rusted, but he kept every receipt, every deed, every bank statement, and every promise. Dad trusted paper more than people. When he passed, he left almost everything to me. Daniel cried at the funeral. He held my hand so tightly my fingers went numb. He stood by the casket, red-eyed, telling my father's friends that he would take care of me. Everyone believed him. I almost did too. Almost. After the funeral, Daniel changed in small ways first. He started coming home late, saying clients were nervous about the market. He took phone calls in the garage with the door closed. He began asking about my father's estate in a voice that was too soft, too careful. "Claire," he said one night while I washed dishes, "your dad's assets are sitting there doing nothing. You should let me organize them." I told him I needed time. He smiled, kissed the side of my head, and said, "Of course, no rush." But the next morning, there were estate folders on the breakfast table. A week after that, he said I was overwhelmed and should give him temporary authority to handle bills. Then he suggested I sell the lake house. That hurt more than anything. The lake house was not just a building. It was my childhood. It was my father teaching me to skip stones at sunset. It was burned hot dogs on a charcoal grill. It was my first heartbreak, my college summers, my dad's quiet voice telling me that water remembers everything. Daniel never liked the lake house. He said it was old, expensive, and too far away. But after Dad died, Daniel suddenly wanted to go there. Not with me. He wanted to inspect it alone. "I'll drive up, check the roof, meet a realtor, and save you the stress," he told me. I said no. His jaw tightened for half a second. Then he smiled again. That was Daniel's gift. He could put a smile over rage so fast you wondered if you imagined the rage. Around that same time, my best friend, Marissa, came back into my life. Marissa Vale and I met in college. She was loud, beautiful, and fearless in a way I envied. She became a paralegal after graduation, then worked for a real estate attorney. We had drifted apart for a few years, but after my dad died, she showed up with soup, flowers, and a box of tissues. "I'm sorry I wasn't around more," she said, hugging me in my kitchen. "Let me help now." I cried into her shoulder. I needed a friend. That need made me blind. Marissa started helping me sort Dad's paperwork. She was good at it. Too good. She found deeds, tax records, and insurance forms quickly. She told me which documents mattered and which did not. Daniel seemed grateful for her help. They even joked about being my state team. At first, I was thankful. Then I began noticing things. Marissa knew details Daniel had not told me. Daniel knew when Marissa had meetings before I mentioned them. Once, I walked into the kitchen, and they stopped talking so sharply, it felt like the air had been cut with scissors. Daniel said they were discussing probate. Marissa looked at the floor. That night, I did something I had never done in 12 years of marriage. I checked my husband's phone. His phone was face down on the nightstand. He was in the shower. I knew his passcode because it was my birthday. It had been my birthday for years. Only now, it did not open. I tried his own birthday, nothing. I tried our anniversary, nothing. Then I heard the shower stop. I put the phone back exactly where it was and lay down with my eyes closed. Daniel came out humming. He smelled like soap and expensive cologne. He kissed my forehead and said, "You okay?" I kept my voice sleepy, just tired. For the first time in my marriage, I pretended to sleep beside a man I was afraid of. 2 days later, I found the life insurance form. It was in Daniel's home office, tucked inside a folder labeled tax notes. I had gone in there looking for printer paper. Daniel hated when I entered his office, but he was at work, and my printer was blinking empty. Inside the folder, I saw my name, Claire Morgan. Policy amount $1 million. Beneficiary Daniel Morgan. Secondary beneficiary, Morgan Hope Foundation. My hands went cold. The policy was dated 6 weeks earlier. My signature was on the last page, but I had never signed it. I know my own handwriting. The signature looked close, but it had a careful, practiced feel. The C was too round. The M leaned the wrong way. Whoever forged it had studied me, but not enough. Under the policy was a letter from a clinic I did not recognize. It said I had been treated for depression and confusion. It said I had expressed fear that I might hurt myself. It said Daniel should monitor me closely. I sat in his leather chair with the paper in my lap and felt the room tilt. I had never been to that clinic. I had never met that doctor. And I had never said those things. I took pictures of everything with my phone. Then I put the papers back exactly the way I found them. For the next week, I became the version of myself Daniel expected. Grieving, tired, trusting, a little scattered. I left mugs on the counter. I asked him to remind me of appointments. I let him speak for me when people called about Dad's estate. I let him believe I was fading. And while he watched me pretending to fall apart, I watched him. I learned his new passcode by standing behind him near the kitchen island and watching the reflection in the dark microwave door. It was not my birthday anymore. It was Marissa's. I waited until Daniel was asleep, then I took his phone downstairs and locked myself in the half bath. There were no obvious messages from Marissa. Daniel was too careful for that. But there was an app I had never seen before. A plain gray icon with no name under it. Inside were messages hidden behind a calculator screen. The first message I opened was from Marissa. She wrote, "She is asking questions again." Daniel replied, "Keep her calm until Friday. After that, it won't matter. Friday." My breath caught. I scrolled. There were months of messages. Not just flirting. Not just betrayal. Plans. They talked about the lake house. They talked about my father's money. They talked about my condition. They talked about how grief made people do unpredictable things. Then I found a message from Daniel that made me sit on the bathroom floor because my knees stopped working. He wrote, "The water is cold enough. No one questions a grieving woman who walks into a lake." Marissa answered, "Make sure the note is in her words." I covered my mouth to keep from making a sound. A note. An obituary. A life insurance policy. A fake clinic letter. A best friend who had come back into my life right when my father's estate became valuable. The story Daniel was writing for me was simple. Poor Claire. She lost her father. She became unstable. Her loving husband tried to help. Then she went to the lake house and never came home. After that, Daniel would collect the insurance, control the estate, sell the lake house, and share the money with Marissa through the foundation they had created. Morgan Hope Foundation. Hope. That word still disgusts me. I put Daniel's phone back before dawn. Then I went into the kitchen, made coffee, and stared out at the rain. My first thought was to call the police. My second thought was that Daniel knew police officers, judges, and half the business owners in our town. My third thought was my father. Dad always said, "Never shout before you have proof. A liar loves noise. Truth likes records." So I started recording. I bought a cheap voice recorder from a pharmacy 3 towns over and kept it in the pocket of my robe. I ordered a tiny camera and hid it in a fake phone charger in the kitchen. I backed everything up to a new email Daniel did not know existed. I called my father's old attorney, Mr. Decker, and asked for a meeting. I did not tell Daniel. Mr. Decker was 72, thin as a nail, with silver hair and a face that looked carved from old wood. He had handled Dad's business for 30 years. When I arrived at his office, he took one look at me and closed the blinds. "Tell me," he said. So I did. I showed him the photos of the insurance policy, the clinic letter, the obituary, and the messages from Daniel's phone. He did not interrupt. When I finished, he leaned back and looked at the ceiling. "Your father was worried," he said. My heart twisted. Worried about what? "Daniel." I had to grip the arms of the chair. "Mr. Decker opened his bottom drawer and pulled out a small brown envelope with my name written in my father's handwriting. "Claire, if you are reading this, I am sorry I was right." Inside was a key, not a house key, not a car key, a tiny brass key with a red string tied through the hole. Mr. Decker slid it across the desk. "Your father left instructions," he said. "He told me to give you this only if you came to me with concerns about Daniel or the estate." I stared at the key. What does it open? A lockbox at the lake house. I pressed my hand to my mouth. Dad had known. Somehow, before he died. My father had seen the thing I refused to see. Mr. Decker gave me more. He told me Dad had quietly changed his will 6 months before he died. Daniel could not touch the lake house unless I personally appeared in front of Mr. Decker and confirmed the sale. If anything happened to me under suspicious circumstances, the house and certain accounts would go into a trust, controlled by an outside board, not Daniel. My father had built a fence around me before he left this world. I cried then, not loudly, not dramatically, just one broken breath at the other. Mr. Decker waited. When I could speak, I asked, "What should I do?" He said, "You should not go home tonight." But I did, because the next morning, Daniel told me he had planned a surprise trip to the lake house for Friday. He said it gently over breakfast, as if he were offering me a vacation. "I think it would help," he said. "One last visit before we decide what to do with the property." Marissa had texted me the same morning. "Maybe Daniel is right. You need closure." Closure. They had already chosen the word they wanted people to repeat after I disappeared. I smiled at Daniel across the table. That sounds good, I said. He looked relieved. That was the first time I understood something important about revenge. Real revenge is not screaming. Real revenge is letting someone believe they won. On Wednesday, I drove to the lake house alone, while Daniel thought I was at a grief counselor appointment. The trip took 5 hours. I cried twice on the highway, not from fear, but from anger so deep it felt old. The farther north I drove, the more I remembered my father's hands on the steering wheel, his thermos of black coffee, his habit of pointing out every weird roadside sign like it was a national treasure. When I reached the lake house, it was late afternoon. The place looked smaller than I remembered and sadder than I expected. The gray siding needed paint. Leaves covered the porch. The lake behind the house was dark and restless under a low sky. I unlocked the door and smelled dust, cedar, and my father's pipe tobacco, even though he had quit smoking 15 years earlier. For a moment, I almost forgot why I was there. Then I remembered Daniel's message. The water is cold enough. I found the lockbox in the basement behind a shelf of fishing gear. It was bolted to the floor, hidden under an old tarp. The tiny key fit. Inside was a flash drive, a stack of papers, and a handwritten letter. I read the letter first. My sweet Claire, if you have opened this box, it means I failed to protect you while I was alive. But maybe I can still help after. I never liked how Daniel watched your money. I never liked how he corrected you in public, and then smiled like he was doing you a favor. I had a man look into him. I should have told you sooner. I was afraid you would hate me. I was wrong to be afraid. There is evidence here. Use it. Trust Decker. Trust yourself. Do not trust Marissa Vale. I stopped reading. Do not trust Marissa Vale. My father knew about her too. The papers explained why. Marissa had been connected to Daniel years before she came back into my life. Not as a friend, not as a stranger, as his partner. They had created 2 small companies together under different names. One bought distressed properties. One received consulting fees from clients Daniel advised. My father's investigator had found wire transfers, business filings, and emails that showed Daniel and Marissa were hiding money together. But the flash drive held the worst part. On it were recordings. Not many. Just 3. My father had recorded meetings with Daniel in the months before he died. In one recording, Daniel was polite, asking about how Dad planned to divide his estate. Dad gave short answers. Daniel pushed harder. He asked whether Dad worried that I was too emotional to manage assets. My father's voice was calm. Claire is not weak, he said. She just loves people who have not earned it. I had to pause the recording because I started crying again. In another recording, Daniel mentioned Marissa by name. He claimed she was helping him plan a surprise for me. Dad asked what kind of surprise. Daniel laughed and changed the subject. The final recording was only 2 minutes long. Dad sounded tired. Daniel sounded angry. You need to stop putting ideas in Claire's head, Daniel said. My father answered, No, Daniel. You need to stop thinking my daughter is alone. But then the recording ended. Dad died 9 days later. His official cause of death was a heart attack. He had a bad heart. That was true. But sitting in that basement, listening to Daniel's voice, I wondered if grief was the only thing that killed him. I called Mr. Decker from the lake house. Then I called a retired detective named Lillian Shaw, a woman my father had once helped after her husband died. Lillian was in her 60s, sharp-eyed, and allergic to nonsense. Mr. Decker trusted her. That was enough for me. By Thursday evening, we had a plan. Not a violent plan. Not a foolish plan. A legal plan. A trap made out of greed. Daniel believed I was going to the lake house with him on Friday. He believed I would be emotional, isolated, and easy to control. He believed Marissa would join us later, to help me sign a few papers about selling the property. So I gave him exactly what he wanted. I told him I had been thinking, and maybe selling the lake house was the right choice. His eyes brightened before he could hide it. "You mean that?" he asked. "I can't keep living in the past," I said. He came around the kitchen island and hugged me. His arms felt like ropes. Over his shoulder. I looked at the tiny camera hidden in the charger and whispered, "I just want it over." Daniel kissed my hair. "Soon," he said. Friday morning, Daniel loaded the car. He packed 2 suitcases, a cooler, and a black garment bag. I recognized that garment bag. I had seen it in the garage 2 nights before when he thought I was asleep. Inside was a simple navy dress I had never bought. It was my size. My funeral dress. I said nothing. Before we left, Marissa stopped by with a folder. She hugged me too tightly. "You're doing the brave thing," she said. Her perfume made my stomach turn. I looked at her face and remembered 20 years of friendship. Dorm room pizza, late night calls, bridesmaid dresses, her hand in mine at my father's funeral. Then I remembered her message. "Make sure the note is in her words." I smiled. "Thank you for helping me," I said. She squeezed my shoulder. "That's what friends do." Not all friends, I thought. Only the kind who want to inherit your ghost. The drive to Michigan was quiet. Daniel played soft music. He kept checking on me, asking if I needed water, if I felt okay, if I wanted him to drive slower. Every question sounded caring. Every question was a thread in the story he planned to tell later. She seemed fragile. She was quiet. I was worried about her. I answered gently. I gave him every line he expected. "Yes, I'm tired. Yes, I've been confused lately. Yes, maybe you should handle the paperwork." Each answer went into the recorder hidden inside my purse. When we reached the lake house, the sky was gray, and the water looked like hammered steel. Daniel carried the bags in. I walked through the house slowly, touching the doorframe, the old kitchen counter, the back of Dad's favorite chair. I was not acting then. I was saying goodbye to the woman who had trusted too easily. Daniel watched me from the hallway. "You okay?" he asked. "I will be," I said. He smiled. He thought that meant I was surrendering. It meant I was ready. At 6 o'clock, Marissa arrived in a rented SUV. That surprised me. Daniel looked surprised too, but only for a second. "You said 7, he told her. "Traffic was better than I thought," she said. Her voice was too bright. She carried a briefcase and a bottle of red wine. We sat at the old dining table. Daniel poured wine for everyone. I lifted my glass but did not drink. I had already switched my glass while Daniel was in the kitchen. Lillian had taught me how. It sounds dramatic, but it was simple. Same type of glass, same red wine, different glass in front of me. I was not taking chances. Marissa opened her folder and spread papers across the table. "There's no pressure," she said, which meant there was pressure. "This just gives Daniel limited authority to move forward with the sale." "Limited," Daniel repeated. I looked at the papers. They were not limited. They gave Daniel power over the lake house, 2 bank accounts, and any related estate decisions. They also included a medical statement, saying I was voluntarily giving him authority, because grief had impaired my judgment. My forged signature appeared on a supporting document. I let my hands shake. "I don't know," I said. Daniel leaned close. "Claire." "Why no?" "You said you trusted me." I looked at him. "I do." He relaxed. Marissa handed me a pen. The pen was silver. Heavy. Expensive. I took it. For a few seconds, nobody moved. Then I set the pen down. "I need to ask something first," I said. Daniel's smile stayed, but his eyes changed. "What?" "What is the Morgan Hope Foundation?" Silence entered that room like a fourth person. Marissa recovered first. It's just an estate planning vehicle. That's strange, I said, keeping my voice soft. Because it's listed as the secondary beneficiary on a life insurance policy I never signed. Daniel went still. Rain started tapping the windows. I looked from him to Marissa. And it is mentioned in my obituary. Marissa's face lost color. Daniel stood slowly. Claire, he said. You're confused. There it was, the word. Confused. The word they had tried to turn into a cage. I reached into my purse and pulled out a folder. No, I said. I'm done being confused. I placed copies of everything on the table. The forged insurance policy. The clinic letter. The obituary. Screenshots from the hidden app. Business records connecting Daniel and Marissa. My father's investigator notes. Photos of the garment bag. Daniel stared at the papers. Marissa whispered, Where did you get those? I smiled at her. My father trusted paper. Daniel lunged for the folder. That was the moment the back door opened. Lillian Shaw stepped inside wearing a raincoat, holding her phone up, recording. Behind her were 2 deputies from the county sheriff's office and Mr. Decker, looking older and angrier than I had ever seen him. Daniel froze. Marissa made a sound like a broken breath. I stood up. My legs shook, but I stood. Daniel looked at me with pure hatred then. Not disappointment, not fear, hatred. The mask finally fell off, and there he was. The man my father had seen. The man I had slept beside. The man who had written my death in advance. You set me up, he said. No, I answered. You set the table. I just invited witnesses. One deputy asked Daniel to step away from the documents. Daniel laughed, but it sounded wrong. This is a misunderstanding, he said. My wife has been unstable since her father died. She needs help. Lillian walked to the dining table and picked up the silver pen. This pen is recording too, isn't it? She asked Marissa. Marissa did not answer. Lillian clicked the pen and held it near her ear. A tiny red light blinked. The room went quiet. That was the twist none of us expected. Marissa had been recording us too. Not to protect me, to protect herself. Later. We learned she had planned to keep a copy of Daniel pressuring me, just in case he tried to cut her out after I was gone. Greedy people do not trust each other. That is why they lose. The deputies found more in Marissa's briefcase. A typed note in my name. A bottle of pills prescribed to someone else. A second set of documents giving Marissa consulting fees from the sale of the lake house. Daniel kept talking. That was his mistake. He told the deputies they were embarrassing themselves. He told Lillian she had no authority. He told Mr. Decker that old men should stay out of family matters. Then Marissa broke. It started small. Stop talking, she snapped. Daniel turned on her. Be quiet. No, she said louder. You said nobody would get hurt. The room changed. The deputies looked at her. So did I. Daniel's face went pale. Marissa put both hands over her mouth, as if she could push the words back in. But some words, once born, do not die. Lillian stepped closer. What did he say would happen? Marissa began to cry. Not pretty tears. Not the kind she used at funerals. These were scared tears. He said she would sign. Marissa said. He said she would take something to sleep. He said. He would make it look like she walked out alone. I thought he was just trying to scare her. I didn't think. Daniel shouted her name. A deputy told him to sit down. I watched the man who had planned my death lose control in my father's dining room. It should have felt satisfying. Part of it did. But another part of me felt hollow. Because every word Marissa said was a shovel digging up the grave they had prepared for me. They were arrested that night. Not for everything. Daniel was first charged with fraud, forgery, conspiracy, and attempted financial exploitation. Later, after the messages, recordings, pills, False medical letter and typed note were reviewed. The charges grew more serious. Marissa made a deal and testified, because betrayal was the only language she spoke fluently. During the trial, Daniel refused to look at me until the very last day. He wore a gray suit and a blue tie. His hair was perfect. His face looked tired but handsome, the kind of handsome that made people want to forgive him before they knew what he had done. The prosecutor played the recording from the kitchen. I just want it over. Soon. Then the prosecutor played my father's recording. You need to stop thinking my daughter is alone. When Dad's voice filled that courtroom, I broke. I tried not to, but I did. I cried silently with my hands in my lap. Mr. Decker sat behind me and put one hand on my shoulder. Daniel finally turned around. For 1 second, I saw something like panic in his eyes. Not guilt. Never guilt. Just panic that the story no longer belonged to him. The jury found him guilty on the main charges. Marissa served less time because of her deal, and I had to make peace with that. Make peace does not mean forgive. It means I stopped letting her sentence measure my freedom. Daniel went to prison. The Morgan Hope Foundation was dissolved. His accounts were frozen. My father's estate stayed mine. But the revenge people ask me about did not happen in the courtroom. It happened 6 months later, on a bright Saturday morning at the lake house. I had not gone back since the arrests. For months. I could not even look at pictures of that place. The lake had become a dark thing in my mind. The porch, the kitchen, the dining table. Every corner felt poisoned by what almost happened there. Then one morning, I woke up and realized I was tired of letting Daniel own my memories. So I drove north. Alone. Not scared. I opened every window in the lake house. I threw away the wine glasses from that night. I scrubbed the dining table until my arms hurt. I took down the old curtains, swept the porch, and burned the stack of fake papers in the fire pit by the water. Then I did something Daniel would have hated. I signed new papers with Mr. Decker. I did not sell the lake house. I turned it into a retreat for women recovering from financial abuse and coercive control. Not a big fancy organization. Nothing with my name glowing on a sign. Just a quiet place where women could come for a weekend, meet attorneys, talk to counselors, breathe clean air, and remember they were not crazy. I named it Bell House, after my father. The first weekend we opened, 4 women came. One had been told she was too stupid to handle money. One had hidden cash in cereal boxes for 3 years. One had lost her business to a boyfriend who forged her name. One barely spoke at all. On Saturday evening, we sat on the dock wrapped in blankets while the sun went down. Nobody asked anyone to tell more than they wanted. Nobody called anyone confused. The lake was calm, shining gold at the edges. For the first time in a long time, I heard my father's voice in my memory without pain. Water remembers everything. I think he was right. The water remembered me as a little girl with skin knees and a fishing pole. It remembered my father laughing. It remembered the woman Daniel tried to erase. And now it would remember women who came there to become themselves again. A year after Daniel's conviction, I received a letter from him. I knew his handwriting before I opened it. For 2 days, I left it on the kitchen counter. Then I took it to the lake house and read it on the porch. He did not apologize. Men like Daniel do not apologize. They negotiate. He said he missed me. He said prison had changed him. He said Marissa had manipulated him. He said he hoped I could remember the good years. At the bottom, he wrote one sentence that made my stomach turn. You know I loved you in my own way. I folded the letter carefully. Then I walked down to the fire pit and burned it too. Some people think revenge has to be loud. They imagine shouting, broken windows, public humiliation, and dramatic speeches. I understand that. There were nights I wanted to scream so loudly the whole county heard me. There were mornings I wanted Daniel to feel exactly 1 minute of the fear he gave me. But the revenge that healed me was quieter. It was waking up in my own house without checking a man's mood. It was signing my own name and knowing nobody had stolen it. It was laughing with women on the dock where someone once planned to make me disappear. It was turning the place chosen for my ending into a beginning for someone else. And on the anniversary of my father's death, I went back to the lake house with a small wooden bench I had ordered from a carpenter in town. Mr. Decker helped me carry it down near the water. Lillian brought coffee in a thermos and pretended she was not crying. The bench had a brass plate on the back. Arthur Bell. Beloved father. He taught me that truth does not need to shout. We sat there until sunset. The sky turned pink, then orange, then deep blue. The water moved softly against the stones. Somewhere across the lake, a dog barked. Mr. Decker told old stories about my father cheating at cards. Lillian laughed so hard, she spilled coffee on her sleeve, and I felt something loosen in my chest. For so long, I had carried my father's death, my husband's betrayal, and my best friend's knife in the same place inside me. I thought healing meant the weight would vanish. It does not vanish. It changes shape. It becomes a scar you can touch without bleeding. Before we left, I walked to the edge of the dock alone. The water was dark, but not frightening anymore. I thought about the obituary Daniel wrote for me. Claire Morgan, beloved wife, devoted daughter, generous friend. He had tried to make my life small enough to fit inside a few false lines, but I was still there, breathing, standing, free. I took my father's old house key from my pocket and held it in my palm. I had kept it after changing all the locks. It no longer opened anything, but I liked the weight of it. It reminded me that some doors close forever, and some doors only open after you stop begging the wrong person for permission. I threw the key into the lake. It made a small sound when it hit the water. Then it was gone. The next morning, I woke up before sunrise. I made coffee in the old kitchen and stood by the window while lights spread across the lake. For the first time since Dad died, the house felt like home again. My phone buzzed with a message from Lillian. "You okay?" I smiled and typed back. "Better than okay." Then I opened the front door and let the morning air in. There are still days when I think about how close I came. I think about the dress in the garment bag, the obituary in Daniel's pocket, the note Marissa helped write, the cold lake waiting behind the house. I think about the version of me who trusted smiles, ignored small warnings, and called discomfort love because the truth was too painful to face. I do not hate her. She survived long enough to become me. That is why, whenever a woman at Bell House tells me she feels foolish, I take her down to the water. I tell her what my father told me. I tell her liars love noise, but truth likes records. I tell her fear can be useful if you let it wake you up instead of bury you. And then I tell her the most important thing. You are not alone just because someone worked hard to make you feel that way. That sentence has saved more than one woman. It saved me first. But every time I feel weak, I go to the drawer where I keep the original obituary. Yes, I kept it. Not because I enjoy pain, but because proof matters. On hard days, I unfold it and read the death Daniel planned for me. Then I look around at my life. The lake house alive with voices. My father's bench by the water. My own signature on my own documents. My own name still mine. And I remember the truth. Daniel wrote my ending too early. Marissa signed the wrong side of history. My father left me a key. And I walked out of the grave they dug for me carrying the shovel. Now, when the sun sets over Bell House and the water turns gold, I sometimes whisper one last thing to the lake, to my father, and to the woman I used to be. Some people bury secrets. I plant flowers over them and let the truth grow.